So good morning, everyone. It is so good to be here. This is our last Sunday on Eye of the Storm, and it's been just an amazing year before we start in Chautauqua, and we'll also continue to be on Zoom. So what I'd like us to do right now is to sing our welcome song. So if you would join as I bring up our lyrics.
We come together in this moment. We bind our hearts and minds, for we all form a tapestry woven from one life, one creation, undivided, all unique expressions of God. We come together now in one accord. We come together in this moment. We bind our hearts and minds, for we all form a tapestry woven from one life, one creation, undivided, all unique expressions of God. We come together now in one accord.
Thank you, Janine. So let us begin with prayer. So we just take this moment to know that connection, that coming together of one mind, one heart, one breath. And so let's sink into that deep breath and allow that breath to open our hearts as we pray together. Oh, great love. Thank you for living and loving in and through us. May all that we do flow from your deep connection with all beings and with ourselves. Listen to our heart's longings for the healing of our world as we open to the infinite field of compassion, wisdom, justice, peace, and radiant well-being that is always available. And so from this place of conscious oneness, we choose to live in your flow, and we offer our prayers in all the holy names of God. Amen and amen. So again, welcome. And as I said earlier, this is the last week of Eye of the Storm, and it's just been an amazing time. And already on our website, if you check it out, what is coming up is so exciting because we have a full summer program of 10 weeks in a row, and that is at unitychq.org. And we also this week, to end our Eye of the Storm at 6:30, we'll have our discussion group. Then beginning the last Sunday in June, we will both be in person at Chautauqua Institution in the Hurlbut Methodist Church. We will be on Zoom and we'll be Facebook Live. So all that information is on our website. last Sunday in June for 10 weeks, all the way through August. And every Wednesday night at 6:30 on those 9 of those weeks, except for the last Sunday, we are going to have a lecture by ministers from all over, Unity ministers from all over. So I hope you'll put that on your calendar. Both the lecture and the Sunday service will also be recorded, so you can see it on our YouTube channel. So welcome to Unity of Chautauqua. And I would like, now that we're going to start, oh, and I forgot to say one thing that's really important, is we're starting later because we have other people sharing the church with us. So also note that our church service will not start at 9:30. It's going to start in the summer for those 10 weeks at 9:45 and will be 45 minutes in length. So let's have Janine now bring us into the last week of Eye of the Storm. And if you remember, Janine was just saying, as we were getting together, and I love it, she reminded me of the most important line of it, that we have committed these weeks to living in such a consciousness as knowing that no one and nothing is against us. So Janine.
This is called Already Home, Already Free by Kirtana. Nothing to seek, nothing to gain, nothing to know, nothing to lose, nothing to do but let go. Let's rest here where the future and the past disappear. Here in the sanctity of now. Nothing to prove, nothing to own, no one to be. Nowhere to move, already home, already free. Let's just stay in the cave of the heart today and bask in this ever-present love. Nothing to fix, nothing to change, nothing to fight. Only what is, what if what is just right. Why not trust this mystery living us and rest in the refuge of the self? Nothing to judge, no one to blame or fear. Only my face greeting me in the mirror. Nowhere to turn, nowhere to hide, nobody else. Nothing outside that isn't inside myself. Let's just see, is anyone here but me? nothing to know, nothing to do, no one to be, nowhere to go, already home, already free.
Oh, Janine, every time she sings that song, my eyes tear up. It feels so appropriate as we conclude Eye of the Storm and we think about the process of moving in the center, the eye. And we've been studying these winds of of conflict that go around, just like a hurricane has winds, where you think of a hurricane, you can think of all the things that it grabs up and circles that hit each other and all that friction. And yet there's a place in the eye. And we've been working towards that for now months of how do we live our lives? And those winds of conflict, what are those words, those practices that bring us to the center? And I was saying earlier, as we were on Zoom before we started recording, when people were talking, that this book has changed my life. Way before the book was ever published, I took courses from Dr. Gary Simmons. He's also a Unity minister. And it shifted so much on how I dealt with anxiety, not only internal to me, but that was coming at me. And so this, our final week, we're going to talk about maybe one of the hardest things about in that those winds of conflict. How do you be non-resistant? If you really want to live as nothing and no one is against you, and can you have faith that doing that, you won't be a doormat? You're going, excuse me, how does that solve anything? Is to sit while there's conflict. If you're like me, you have some strong feelings about maybe some of the things that are going on in your life, that are going on in our country. And I'm thinking, I've got to go do something about this. And I'm going to suggest that instead of saying, I've got to go do something, I've got to become something about this. I've got to become a consciousness that lives without resistance. So I want to share a story. And this young man, well, he's no longer young, but when he began writing this, his name is Claude Thomas, and he was a Vietnam veteran. And he also then studied, he had extreme PTSD, and he then studied, you know how some of the most difficult times in our lives may pull us to the best teachers, unexpected gifts that pull us out of this. And his was Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist teacher. And so he became part of that community, but he describes how he suffered and he could never sleep more than 2 hours because, as you can imagine, Vietnam kept coming back to him. He would hear imaginary sounds of bombs and see people suffering. And so it got to where his whole life was so disrupted that he decides that he has to use both legal and illegal drugs to drown out this. And then he meets a teacher and he meets a way of life. And I'll let his words tell you about that. He says that he was so sure that this behavior of his, this sleeplessness and this terror, was a central symbol that in not being all right. He said he had decided he was, quote, he had now labeled himself with this idea that he would never be all right. But he said that some years later, after getting sober, this is what happened to him. And he had already in his Buddhist practice, and he was standing by a sink in his cottage, and he was washing dishes, and he looked through the window and he saw these beautiful trees and a squirrel playing, and he just had this relaxed feeling of being centered and connected. And in that, a voice spoke to him. And it said this: you can't sleep. So now what? And he said he began to laugh. And he said, in that moment was one of complete acceptance. I finally understood that this was just how I was. To resist, to fight, to attempt to alter the essential nature of my now life was in fact making matters worse. And now I understood that I simply needed to learn how to live in the reality of who I was. In this moment, I discovered that it was here in the midst of suffering and confusion that healing and transformation can take place. Wow, think of that. That's really, to me, so strong. It was in the midst of suffering that he learned that as he no longer resisted it, a transformation in his life began to take place. He said, if I can stop trying to escape. And then he goes on to say, for us, but I'm not special, you know, you could do this too. You can face your sorrow, your wounds. You can stop wanting some other life, some other past, some other reality. You can stop fighting against the truth of yourself and breathing in and breathing out, open to your own experience. You can just feel what is there, explore it until you discover the liberation that comes with stopping the struggle and becoming fully present to your own life. This is the real path to peace and freedom. You could do this for yourself. You could do this for your family. You can do this for your world. Okay, so, and I will say that that's not easy, that our culture trains us to fight things, right? We've got to solve it. And isn't it interesting that there's a place, and I say that that's in the eye of the storm. There's a place where a wisdom and a truth and a healing can happen, but it's usually not one of our mind, that our mind is thought. So all this struggle keeps us away from that place of knowing the source of our healing. And yet we have to, the hard part is to embed ourselves in the reality of this moment and not wish it were different, not wish our past were different. And then the healing, that's the paradox in it. So I'd like to read you, this is from Martin Buber, and he was born in the 1800s, a theologian, a Jewish theologian. And he said this: man cannot approach the divine by reaching beyond the human. He can approach him through becoming human. To become human is what he, the individual man, has been created for. Wow, okay, so I don't know about you, but when I was a child, how I was to relate to the divine was to be perfect and to not show my feelings of anger or hurt or process any of them. It was just to follow the rules, be absolutely good. And so Martin Buber is saying, you have to not reach beyond, but to be human. That to be human is our way of God. And isn't it interesting that so many of us look at another person and we judge ourselves failing because look how good their lives are, right? And that's because we compare their outside to our insides. And if we were more authentic about our humanness, what we would discover is that the very act of being human is to overcome struggles. And in those struggles, when we find the blessings, we become that connected to the divine. And so Dr. Simmons says, from our author, says, when life doesn't meet our expectations, we resist, right? We helping unlock unwanted circumstances, or helping, lock unwanted circumstances more tightly in place. And one of our favorite lines, he says, is, it shouldn't be this way. Can you feel the lack around that sentence? It shouldn't be. Something is lacking in my life. So that's the opposite of a practice of feeling abundant, that there's good in our lives. And that as we seek to not resist, that good will become ours. But instead we lock in and we actually divert all that loving energy into that struggle. He said, our mental resistance can pervade every waking hour, keeping us in shutdown mode. A resistant thought is a negative thought. And he goes on to say that big paradox is, you cannot change what you first don't accept. Excuse me. So as long as you resist, you cannot see the problem fully and clearly. So our problems, he says, can become a crusade for love if we don't resist them. And Henry Miller said this profound thing that's just, it's so much aligned with the idea that living is nothing and no one's against you. Everything we shut our eyes to, everything we run away from, everything we deny or despise serves to defeat us in the end. What seems nasty and painful and evil can become a source of beauty, joy, and strength if faced with an open mind. It takes a lot of faith to believe that. And it takes, for me, it's been an experience of when I have moved away from the thoughts that this is not what I want, that this isn't how it should be, and I surrendered totally, that indeed I did find love. And it wasn't in the way that would solve the problem that I thought, but in a way that it felt like God was in the solution. So the fourth and last win this week of the eye of the storm of conflict is defensiveness. That what keeps us out in the storm is defending ourselves and resisting what is, resisting those things that feel against us. So Gary says that when we defend ourselves, our whole body seizes up. And you probably know that, we've talked about it before, that fight or flight or freeze thing. We stop becoming part of the solution and we add to the conflict in those times. And, you know, our bodies don't lie. If we want to check in to see if we're resisting anything and we're defending anything and we're in that conflict, that wind of conflict, all we have to do is sit and become aware of our bodies. I don't know about you, but that wasn't something that I did, is really feeling where the tightness, what am I holding onto? And it's so interesting without even having to think about it, to just let my body relax and see what comes up and watch the shift. Well, on Easter sunrise services, we would have a poem and we were out in our garden early in the morning and the chaplains would read. Some of you know James Dillard Freeman, and he was the poet laureate and he died in the early 2000s. He was actually a minister that worked with the Fillmores and knew them intimately. He wrote this poem and we read it, and it was a tribute to the earth, the wind, to fire, and most of all to water. And this one part I want to read of the poem that we read in the sunrise service, because for me, if we're thinking about non-resistance, this poem speaks of what we become, what consciousness, and you may, as you're listening to it, you may choose to close your eyes and just feel these words. Oh, you that have made me, I pray that you make me like water. In me are tides no less than in the sea. I would have the mind and spirit like water. Water never resists, yet it wears away the most resistant things. Water fits itself to conditions, takes the shape of any bowl it is poured into, yet nothing shapes more things than water. The continents take the shape it gives them. Water does work, but it is never busy. It may turn a mill or light a city, but not by trying. Water lets itself be used. Water has learned humility. It is colorless. Yet what is the rainbow but water? It is tasteless. But what is there better to drink? It always seeks the lowest place, but those in highest places come to drink of it. Jesus loved to walk by water. He went to it not only to quench his thirst, but for peace. So this morning, as I get a little nervous before Sunday mornings, and I wake up very early. This morning was 4 o'clock, which was really good for me. I slept to 4. But I went through this poem in my head and felt water moving, like my muscles becoming soft and fluid, like water. So it's so tempted for me to get angst up before Sunday and thinking, did I remember this? Am I going to say this? On and on and on at my brain. But there's a place where my body, and looking at my body, I could feel it. So the question we can ask ourselves to know if we are like the water, that we ask the God of our being, could I be like water, is to say, do I feel hard or do I feel like I'm flowing in this life? Just that check-in all the time. So Gary talks about to get to this place of non-resistance, to become this softness, this openness, this curiosity, this one that doesn't jump to defense and stuff, that we have to become centered. And he invited something different that maybe you haven't thought. You know, we talk so much about the head and the heart and our connection to the head and the heart. And that if we open our heart and not just sit in our head, that all this warmth and compassion comes out. But there's another part that he refers to become centered into that centering place of non-resistance. He said that we center in our gut, and he calls this centering place about 1.5 inches below our navel, in which he talks about the power from that place, that if we become aware, and when I took a class from him, like it must have been, it's probably about 30 years ago, the first time, and I repeated it because it was so powerful. And then he produced the book, and again, back to the book for me over the years. He had, and I think it was me actually, he had all of us stand up and have partners in the class, and he would have us stand and one of us push against the shoulder of the other and ask the person being pushed against how they felt about it. And of course they felt resistance, no surprise there. And they said and so when we spoke with our partner, we'd say, yeah, I wanted to push back. I didn't like that. I felt pushed over. Then he asked us to breathe into this place, not only open our hearts, but center our breath into this gut, this place. And if you've listened to some science lately, they talk about our gut area as a powerful place for our health. So I find this very fascinating, the synchronicity that it's not just the heart, it's not just the mind, but it's really the gut. If we stand, and so we breathe into our gut, and the person then would push against us, and we'd notice how we felt so powerful and didn't feel like this need to push back. That if we could stay centered, and if you remember reading in the book in the early part, Gary talks about Aikido, that practice, and it sounds like it's self-defense, but in Japan, it's not about self-defense at all. In fact, it's about striving for peace and harmony. And how you do it is when your attacker comes toward you, you blend in, you use his energy of attack. So rather than pushing against his energy, which is what is natural, let me just say that it's what we'll want to do first. And we'll have to catch ourselves because we'll want to push against. But the truth is, if we can blend with this energy, if we can use it, it says even a small person can flip a very aggressive, large person by syncing with their energy. And so that got me to thinking about syncing in energy with others and not just applying this center of peace to myself, but I was thinking about our country now and how we really have forces that are doing that pushing really hard against each other and making the other wrong. And there's a lot of fear involved. So we are really sitting in the storm. We are sitting in the conflict of the winds, but there is a group that is coming into the center. And there's one group that's just wonderful to watch. They're going to churches and taking both Democrats and Republicans and having these deep conversations. And they're called Better Angels, to appreciate each other. It's to sync the energy with each other, knowing that the healing has to take a place where both sides learn to live as no one and nothing. Nothing and no one is against them. And that is so powerful that the Better Angels group is actually bringing people to the center of the storm by using this place where we are connected to our power. And that partly not only comes from the head, not only comes from the heart, but it also comes from being centered in our gut. So I want to tell a story I've used this story before, but this Bible story, but I don't know, every time I speak about it, I get something different from it. And so it's about Jesus, and it's from John, the 8th chapter, 6th through 11th verse. And it's the time when the scribes and the Pharisees bring to Jesus a woman caught in adultery. Probably all of you almost know all the lines by now. For me, though, every time I read it, I get a new insight. So let me just say the story once more. And, Jesus is, the scribes and the Pharisees are not happy with Jesus because he's getting a big following. And here's this, they are living as something is against them, right? They are feeling that he is taking their power. And they're frustrated because they can't figure it out, because his power is what? One of love and compassion. And theirs is, at this point, he's a reformer. If you remember, Jesus was not, quote, a Christian. He was reforming the Jewish, which he felt had started going in the wrong direction of this power thing of who's in power, and this group's the best group, and you ignore this other group. And Jesus took all of those that were ignored and pushed to the side, and he said, follow me, like follow. His heart did this open, but they didn't understand that. That was frustrating for them. So they figured, okay, we've got to get rid of this guy. How can we do it? Oh, you know what we could do? We'll bring this woman, and normally they would have just stoned her themselves, but they thought he's claiming to be a prophet of God. And so if he really believes in Moses and he's read, he knows that she needs to be stoned. So if he doesn't do that, we will discredit him with the Jewish people. That's it, end his ministry. But they also knew that he was going to catch 22, because the Romans said, you can't do this. You can't kill somebody. Only we decide who gets punished. So you can see Jesus is in that catch 22. And if you were in kind of your normal consciousness, you'd probably want to push back at the Pharisees and the scribes. I mean, I'd be kind of mad that they were tricking me and trying to get me in a catch 22 where there was no out. But Jesus, being that profound teacher of living in that consciousness of connected, with the wholeness of his being that we call the Christ, that divine pattern within him that he kept calling us to. So what does he do? He doesn't push against them. What he does is, it says he bends down and he writes in the sand. And no one knows, doesn't say in the scriptures what he wrote, why he did that. But I kept thinking, I wonder if that was his, quote, timeout to say, let me just get to my center. Because it would be easy. He was both human, he lived his humanity and his divinity and invited us into that. And so as he comes out of that place and stands up, he says, whoever has not sinned, he invited them to throw the first stone. Well, it says in the scripture, and I love this, it says, everybody's turned away. And first, the oldest turned and walked away the quickest. Amazing that they may have had a few sins in their life. And thinking about that, I thought, what is that invitation? How is that coming to the center? And I thought what he said was that, look, we're all one. You and this woman are one. All of us have done at times things we wish we hadn't done. That is powerful. So he spoke oneness while they spoke separation. He gave an answer and there was no answer to that. And I found when you can do that, when you can come from this place of oneness, either one of two things happen. Either people walk away, the quote enemy, that feels like an enemy at first, walks away because they no longer vibrate at that consciousness, or they're transformed. And here's where we come with the woman. And my belief, if I'm adding to that story, was that he asks her, he says, oh, where are your accusers? And she says, they're gone, Lord, they're gone. She sees that this power of love. And he says these words, which to me are some of the most powerful words ever spoken. Neither do I condemn you. I want you to feel that. Neither do I condemn you. Those words will bring any of us to that center. If we're criticizing ourselves, and we say that, if we're hard on ourselves, we go, neither do I. Feel that Christ, that's that Christ within us, that's the Christ around us, is always inviting us to a place of neither do I condemn. It's the place where healing takes place. And we can take that further and we can look out in our world. And if we're reading the news and being exasperated with some of the things people are saying that just feel that they are so not only true, but mean, we can say it to them so that we can be the healing. Neither do I condemn you. The God of your being loves them, loves me, and wants this healing. And where there right now is a big storm, especially I feel like in our politics in our country, that's because the healing is going to transform us when we wake up. And people are. It's small right now. It's going to take maybe generations. That's okay. We are part of that. Every time we say, neither do I condemn. Myself for the anger I feel when I read your words, for you, for the anger you felt when you said them. So what do we do with that? What are some of the questions we can ask ourselves that in times when we're feeling that stress, that resistance? What are some things that will wake us up? And as Janine earlier said, just before we recorded, she said she's been using the words, nothing and no one is against me. And as I just said, neither do I condemn myself, you, our world, the way it is, the way it's working out. But there's some other things that Gary has in the book I think are just interesting. And again, remember, I will be emailing you if you're on our email list. And if you've gone to our website and signed up, I'll email you these notes and these questions. And on Wednesday night, when we have a discussion, we'll look at these questions and we'll look at what ones over the course of the eye of the storm have really worked for you. So some of this is he says, look at the overview of, try to get a higher view of what's going on, because often we make up a story and fill in the blanks, and we don't really have the whole story, right? And one of my favorite ones, and again, Janine, you inspired me again with this one, because you said it in one of our discussion groups, and it has stayed with me over and over again. What am I making this mean? So when I'm feeling conflict, when I'm looking at the newspaper, what am I making this mean? And then ask yourself the second question. This is a good one. How am I pushing this away? Could be something in myself I'm pushing away, but it could also be something out there. What am I pushing away? What am I feeling is ugly or shouldn't be here and shouldn't be the way that? And so we look at our shoulds and look at how we're telling a story about those. That as I said in the first story with the young man at the time, he had to stop pushing the story away. And then Gary suggests we say, what inner resource would I need? What's missing for me in order not to feel uneasy in this situation? What's missing? What am I missing? Am I missing the full story? Am I missing feeling good about myself and honoring myself and the other person? And then finally, the question he says, is there another way of seeing this that doesn't diminish me or them? Whoa. Is there another way of seeing this? And then he says, from your center place, you ask the other side of the question. What is the truth about this situation? What am I here to learn? That's a big one. What am I here to learn in this that I'm resisting? And what does from the center of my being, when I'm feeling centered, what do I want to do? What does God working through me want to do? What is the authentic action that is mine to do? So I'd like to read his last words before we go into meditation. These are his last words in the book as we finish our book. He says, we can hold a space for love to happen. We can stand at the center of the storm without making others wrong. We can bring communion, principle, purpose, and non-resistance to the storm, calming the winds and water. You are called to be a peacemaker as a pathway to God and as a demonstration of your wholeness and worth. The entire universe supports you in making peace wherever you are and in every storm that comes upon you. No one is against you. Make your pathway to God a demonstration of this truth. For blessed are you who have been called to make peace in a world that longs to know its wholeness and worth. And so it is. And so, Janine, would you move us into meditation?
As I say a tender yes to everything that comes to me, my heart is open, I am free. I open to all that is It brings me to my knees. I surrender. I am peace. As I say a tender yes to everything that comes to me. My heart is open, I am free. I open to all that is. It brings me to my knees. I surrender. I am peace.
So just allow those words to sink deep as we take a breath together, the one breath that connects us to all beings. Let's hold that word tender. Tender. What would that feel in our bodies to say a tender yes? Yes to this moment. Yes to the joys and the sorrows. And all the ways that each of those can open our hearts and that can ground us in compassion and understanding. Oh, sweet spirit, I say a tender yes in my life. Centered deep into the power of love and this moment. I seek a third way. Of valuing my wholeness, my worth, and that of those that no longer needing to fight or push, but to allow love in action, to live and breathe, to be the way of God. I am a peacemaker. Every time that I am centered, and so as James Dillard said, "Oh, you who have made me, I pray that you make me like water." Water never resists, yet it wears away the most resistant. I would have the mind and spirit of water. As we move into the silence, I would have the mind and spirit of water. I would have the mind and spirit. I say that tender yes. What is
Tender yes to everything that comes to me. My heart is open, I am free. I open to all that is, it brings me to my knees. I surrender, I am peace.
Oh, thank you, Janine. And so now is our time of giving an offering. And just to remind you that what we give is not only our tithes and our financial giving, but we also give an intent, a consciousness. We understand that in our culture, we often take money and we've separated it from spirit. But I invite you that whenever you hold a gift and you give it, whatever your finances move out through the universe, that you see it as God energy and that you love and respect it as that. And so I just also want to thank everyone who has been giving and sending checks. We also now have on the end of our website, we have a button that will take you to PayPal, but you don't have to use PayPal, that you can give. So I'm just really appreciative for all the work, including my daughter who did our website and put in the donate button. So that'll be on your emails too. So thank you so much. And let's say our offertory blessing together. Love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, and I am grateful. So feel that, take that in as we say our gratitude.
I am so blessed, I am so blessed, I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed, I am so blessed, I am so grateful, I am so blessed, I am so blessed, I am so blessed,
And so if you would join me now as we say our unity prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. So we just say, thank you, God. Thank you for each other. And thank you for this path that brings love and peace into the world.